Welcome, everyone. I'm Sid Harrell from Code for America.
My name is Kavi Harshawat, also from Code for America.
And this morning we are talking about user research for improving anything you wish to improve. This is one of my favorite quotes ever by one of my inspirations in the design field. And it just reminds me how much this is about making good design decisions. Whatever your design goals might be, design processes can quickly turn into arguments and personal discussions without a good data basis for making a decision. The best way to make a good evidence-based design decision is to see how your design works for somebody who is an intended user. This is a practice that you can do with as few as 3 or 4 users. If you are used to other kinds of research, you might think we need to survey thousands of people. We need to get a focus group in with 50 people. There's a really interesting thing about the practice we're going to share today, which is basically qualitative interviewing, where if you talk to 5 people, you will identify many of the things that you need to work on your service, on your application, on your website. But what I like about this particular picture is it points out that if you talk to one person who is actually from your population that you're hoping to serve, you are getting a lot more information than if you didn't talk to anybody. So there's really no reason not to start. Don't start because you think you can't go big enough in scale. Don't not start because you think it's too complicated. Because it really, really is not complicated. So let's get a show of hands. How many people have ever conducted a user research or usability session? What are you guys doing in the 101? All right, that's amazing. I am really gratified to see that. I hope we can share some techniques in here. If you haven't, have you ever listened to another human describe how they're feeling about a process that they're dealing with? Can you raise your hand if you've done that? Congratulations, you have the skills necessary to do this well. If I have to describe the process in the shortest possible way, these are the things that are really important. Get a person. Get a look at their screen. Screen stands in here for something that could be a different kind of process. Ask what they need from whatever it is. Have them actually try to do it in front of you. And shut up and listen. Also, they will tell you things that may not accord exactly with what they're doing, and you want to pay attention to both sides of that. It's really interesting how self-reporting and actual actions will sometimes reveal things where people are in conflict. So we don't want to do much talking. Let's get started. We're going to hand out some paper, and we're going to ask you guys to self-organize a little bit. So you should be in pairs or threes. I'll tell you what's going on so you can decide what you'd like to do. So would anybody like to do their first user research session this morning? Wow, raise your hand. Thank you. You are awesome. Okay, so for absolute sure, you should be a moderator. Other people who'd like to practice should also choose the moderator role. We have 3 possible roles. You can be a moderator. You can be a participant, which if you're very experienced, I'll ask you to take that role for this one round. Or you can be an observer, where you can take notes. So we just passed out some instructions, and we're going to do a little test, not of your participant, but of the usability of these instructions. These instructions are for doing a physical task. We don't need any screens. These are actually printed from a website. So what I have up here is find out what's hardest about presenting instructions for a physical task online. If you wanted to improve this, the data that you will get from this little session that we're going to do, that's going to be about a 10-minute session, is exactly the data that you would need to make this better. So we need moderators, we need participants, and we need observers as options. So who would like to be a participant in this round? The person who actually does the task. We will have a second round where you can switch. So who would like to be a participant? Okay. Who would like to be a moderator? Okay. We've got a pretty even split. Can I get participants paired with moderators at each of the table? You should probably sit next to each other. And in the back where there's not a table. And if you would not like to take either role, I'm going to ask you to be an observer and help the moderator record what goes on. Hi. The observer is the moderator. Great question. Thank you. So the question was, what's the difference between the moderator and the observer? The moderator is the person who is having a conversation with the participant. The observer is somebody who's helping take notes. So, a couple of things about what we're going to do. It usually helps to have a motivated user. So participants, I have some very fine artisanal San Francisco fancy chocolate bars. Whoever completes the task the fastest gets one of these. All right? And moderators, I'll give you 2 tips before we start. Ask them to narrate what they're doing as they go through the task, and don't help them. Is everybody ready? We have a 10-minute timer. Yep. One more question. The moderator is trying to figure out if these instructions are good enough and what should be changed about them. All right? 3, 2, 1, go.
I've got it. Okay, so I think I have.
Anybody getting close? Chocolate at stake here. You actually just won an extra chocolate bar. You want to know why? This gentleman did one of the most valuable things that a participant can ever do in a test. He was completely honest that he was so dang frustrated he gave the heck up. This is one of the most useful findings that you can get out of a test. I can tell you, this is not working for my audience here. So, thank you. Well done. I suspect our moderators got a lot of information about physical task instructions out of this session. Can I hear some of it? So, did anybody see a participant employing a workaround? Tell me about that.
I saw that on the very first step, the assumption was made to start with a square, even though the instructions didn't say anything about starting with a square piece.
Interesting. Others?
I see most of the people should have been stuck between the step 7 and 8 because everybody started doing this design just by seeing the diagram. But when you go through with the diagram and the instruction, I hope you would have been completed, at least achieved the step. So just the first time when you start doing, all people consider the diagram is going to help you a lot than reading an instruction.
So that's interesting, yeah. So what would that tell you as a person trying to make these instructions better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It has to be more better or a little bit more steps on the diagram. So
Right.
yeah.
So what were some of the things that people ran into that were difficult?
What's the definition of a pocket?
What an amazing piece of vocabulary. And I've been doing this particular exercise for like 4 years, and I still don't know what that is. I should probably look it up at some point. In the back?
The arrows were bullshit.
Nice. How about here?
You observe that we don't know what the dotted lines mean exactly. Like, it is a crease, right? But
So the arrows and the dotted lines, these are conventions of design in here that the participants did not understand. Yeah.
the size of the paper changes in each diagram.
Yeah. Did anybody get any emotional content out of their participant? Yeah.
Motivation.
Tried hard. Really cared. And actually, how does that make you feel about wanting to help him or not wanting to help him?
Definitely wanted to. He had a lot of negatives right off the bat, and I had to try to talk him through it. It's going to happen. He's like, no, it's not. This is going to hell. This is
That's awesome. We're going to talk a little bit later about recruiting motivated users, which is one of the ways to make one of these sessions really valuable. I will admit right now that that is the worst set of origami giraffe instructions on the internet, and I have looked. So thank you for putting up with that. Would anybody like to switch roles and do round 2? Yes. Okay. So, interestingly, the same website has a supposedly simpler set of instructions for the second set of people. You can fold up your own instructions if you're frustrated with them. Will you help me pass some out? So this is a different set, and we're going to do a little bit of a different contest. This time, it's going to be the most beautiful instead of the fastest. That will be the winner. Do you have, I missed some over here. So we're going to do the same thing. You all probably learned something in round one about how the moderator asked questions if they asked any, whether they were sympathetic, whether they were friendly. Did you do one in this row, or do you already have one?
Back there.
Okay, back here. Okay. This one is a little bit easier for many groups. We're going for the most beautiful.
Does anyone else need one?
Yeah, do you need one? Huh? Absolutely, thank you. So some folks came in late. We are doing a usability evaluation of these instructions for a physical task. Some of us are playing participants who are trying to do the task. Some of us are playing moderators who are watching them do the task and asking them questions to understand how the instructions might be improved. And some people are playing observers and taking notes. Is everybody ready? Some people are already going. 3, let's give it 7 minutes this time.
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, go. At this point, we have a number of finishers. I'm going to give the beauty prize. Oh, no. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. These are pretty equal here. Everybody looks better with eyelashes. Luckily, I have 2 prizes left. You may have to fight each other for peanut butter versus olive oil. Preferences? Peanut butter. Olive oil is actually my favorite. It's like the best thing in the universe. All right, good job, guys. So, for people who acted as moderators, was that comfortable at all? Would you share a little bit about that?
Well, I found myself getting involved too, like as a participant with her almost rather than any sort of
Yeah, that's a very common emotion actually when you're doing this, like because especially if it's something that you have developed, you want the person to succeed, and watching them struggle is hard. So there are good ways to express that empathy without actually telling them it's the button on the right, and thus breaking the test. So that's great. Anybody else have any thoughts about the experience of moderating? In the back.
At a certain point in participant, what's the final step and work backwards to approximate how it's supposed to look at the end rather than get through the middle steps?
That's so interesting. Was that something that you would have expected at all? Yeah, amazing. People are so cool.
At one point, the participant understood that there were some steps that were missing, and so it's like, well, now I know that there's steps missing, so why don't I just go ahead and, make those steps up? So it's like, oh, with that understanding, it's like, oh, you don't just have to follow the
Mm-hmm. Anything else people found hard about being moderators? Not helping. Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, thank you for being so incredibly game and going through this without any actual help from us. We're now going to do a little bit of that and talk about how we can do this really well. But I want you to know that even for somebody who's been doing usability interviews for close on 20 years now, this is the core of the technique that you have just done this morning. This is what is not rocket science about it. Yes, there are refinements, but this is really all that it is. It's sitting next to a person who has a desire to do something and observing them interacting with a process or an app or a piece of paper and drawing conclusions that you can then put into your design. So, a few tips.
So one of the things that a lot of people, someone actually earlier pointed out, was actually understanding what the goal of the task was. Were you trying to test out the participant, or were you actually trying to figure out the quality of the instructions? It's actually something that's really important in research, just trying to basically understand what your goal is and working your way backwards by finding participants to help you achieve that answer. So that's actually what we call kind of start at the end. So before you do any work, you'd want to set your goals, and through creating questions to answer those goals, you basically create a set of processes to find that answer.
Stuff to do beforehand. If you have assumptions that you know about or biases that you know about, write them down. If you think a particular step is going to be the problem, you might lean towards finding that step a problem or encouraging people when they start to say that step is a problem. It's okay, but you actually will be less prone to doing that if you write that down as an assumption. So useful quick practice there. Scripting at some level of formality. I like to just write down the questions I would like to get answered, not word for word, not necessarily in an order, but if I don't get these 4 things answered, I haven't completed everything I'd like to do with my time with this person. You guys just had notes. Some of the other things you might do is record a session, audio or video. You might take pictures, perhaps, of ways that the person set something up. So having those decisions in advance, thinking about who you might need to communicate the results of this research to in order to make it useful in developing something better. Moment about ethics. People are sharing a small slice of their lives with us. Even when we're talking about sitting down with somebody for 20 minutes in a cafe to look at a website, this is something that needs to be attended to. You don't want to scare people by saying, I'm doing scientific research here and you are a subject. That's kind of incredibly inappropriate. You want to talk to them about participating in research, but you also want to let them know exactly what that entails. That means how much of their time are you asking for up front? That means whether or not it will be confidential and in what way. So I am going to report this to X people only in aggregate. Might be a really important thing to be able to say. I'd like to take your picture, but it's optional. Might be another way to share exactly how you can do that. And if you run into an experience like happened with the first giraffe, where somebody who has a genuine need, let's say, from a municipality, can't get it done during your session, one of the really good things you can do is actually help them achieve that need afterwards through the right means. So after you document how awful this is for them and how it doesn't work, make them whole at the end. And make sure that you respect that this is a piece of their time that they've chosen to share with you. Not brain surgery either. So thinking about the idea of scripting, you might say it would be great to get everyone in advance to do the same task, right? So please go and please buy a ticket to 12th Street Station from this machine over here. It's not a bad task, but if that's not where the person is going that day, they're not going to be quite as invested. And if you think about it, this task, phrased this way, so hi, I'd like to observe you buying your ticket. Where are you going today? Interesting. Could I watch you as you go about getting a ticket? So if the person doesn't have a plan to go to 12th Street, they're going to get in kind of a puzzle-solving mode and be like, okay, let me get up here and figure out how to go to 12th Street. If the person is on their way somewhere and needs to get there, they're going to be much more in the flow of their day, and you're going to get a much more authentic kind of feedback. The frustration is going to be more real if it's there. The happiness is also going to be more real if it's there. Bunch of useful phrases. I'm going to run through these really fast, and then we're going to get to talking about how to recruit people who will give you authentic feedback. So it's often useful to do intercepts. Kavi is really good at this. Hi, would you like to participate in research today? I'm working to improve this thing, and I'm collecting feedback. It's been suggested to me at times that you send the youngest and cutest person on your team to make the approach if you're doing intercepts. I suggest the friendliest and most appealing person for a little more comfortable distinction there for who you want. Some really, really important ones. This is not a test of you. Many people, when they get in a testing situation, they've been in a lot of testing situations, it feels like anxiety about whether I'm going to be good at this, and that's not what it's about. You need to take the temperature down. You need to tell them also there's no right or wrong answers here. And say explicitly in most cases, positive and negative feedback is equally valuable. Nothing you can say is going to hurt my feelings. That one's good if you can do it authentically. Yeah?
Would you recommend less session one-on-one or I mean,
Like a focus group versus a one-on-one?
no, like in the room there's only
Yeah.
people, there's only one study being run instead of 2 or 3 and then there's people like, I don't know, I feel like right now when we were doing the giraffe exercise,
Yeah.
it was kind of peer pressure, right?
Yeah. Yes. This had a lot of problems with it if it had been a real study.
But what do you think, like when you're testing a system,
Yeah.
would that affect?
So I think that in general, it helps if there's more intimacy, if there's just one-on-one conversation. But that doesn't mean that you only have to do it that way. But it is important to keep in mind that you don't want to overwhelm the person you're interviewing by having lots of people asking them questions at the same time. You want to make sure that they feel comfortable both with your body language and the way you're speaking, but as much also about the environment that you're interviewing them in. So it's okay to have a moderator and also an observer who's kind of taking notes, but just want to note probably to that person who's observing to silently kind of wait and observe, and then when time is right, ask questions towards the end of the session.
The classic usability lab setup, right, is a one-way mirror with the observers in another room. Everyone feels weird being in that room, both the people in the back and the people in the front. You can approximate it by broadcasting stuff from a webcam to a different room. That's another thing you just need to be transparent about so that people know, yes, there's a few other people from my team who are watching in another room. Make sure that's okay.
And to be honest, I've never had an interview participant not believe that there was someone on the other side of a one-way mirror, even when there isn't.
Yeah. I just need you to be yourself and act as you naturally would. One little thing I'd like you to do differently is if you could narrate your way through the app that we're looking at today. So it really helps to get people talking instead of just saying, oh, and if they have been asked and prompted to start a narrative, then it's easier for them to continue it and not have you have to say, wait, could you tell me why you made that face? These are some of my favorites. This is a real sociolinguistics thing. People are more comfortable when they know that you're listening. And there are some nuances to this. So we all probably have a natural way that we do this when we're listening to somebody. So I'm talking to Kavi and I'm like, hey, Kavi, what did you do this morning?
Oh, I just got up, ate some breakfast, and actually ran into try to get a taxi to get over here. It was pretty tough. Yeah.
Huh. Interesting. There's a couple of ways I could have done that. I've said, hey, Kavi, what'd you do this morning?
Oh, I took a shower, ate some breakfast.
Okay, got it.
Oh, okay.
Don't do that one unless you're actually at a point where you want to take control of the conversation and redirect the person. You want the kind of warm, neutral, oh, right, yeah, I can do this for an hour. You still want it to feel comfortable to you, but you want to look out for that kind of ending nonverbal communication. It also helps to have a few further questions in your pocket. Tell me a little bit more about that. You just did something a minute ago that I wanted to go back to. Could you tell me why you clicked on that particular thing? Talk me through what just happened. These are all prompts to keep talking, and often you need to pull one out when somebody asks a question. They're like, wait, what is this actually for? And you say, well, I'd actually love to know what you think it's for. Researchers are famous for turning it around on you. If you want to get a rating, and this is a great impulse, people don't tend to respond as well to the sort of scientific Likert scale, midpoint, 7-point scale. On a scale of 1 to 9, how satisfied are you with? It's not as authentic. So one thing that I've found to work pretty well in relatively informal sessions is just the letter grades that people knew from school, because basically everybody knows what that means and they can also customize it. So I'll often ask somebody and they'll say, well, kind of a B minus. It's like, great, that tells me something very precise, in fact, about where it sits for them on an emotional level. And then it gives me this great follow-up question. Thank you. So suppose we wanted to get it to an A+ for you. What would that require? And perhaps the most important one in the whole conversation is the thank you for sharing that piece of their life with us and helping us do a much better job. So a couple of things. If you decide that you're going to talk to a few people, 8 or 10, it's actually not that big of a set if you're doing something complicated. It might start to get a little involved. The sessions might start to run into each other. And if you go back and you just have a stack of notes and 8 or 10 hours of footage, it can be, you have to take that much time again to review it. A couple of tricks. After every interview, write down, just for yourself, a 1-sentence description of this person. This was the lady from West Oakland who had the interaction with parking where her car was booted. She was wearing a red shirt. Number one surprise, there's almost always some surprise, and that's an emotional connection for you. Write that down, that will help you remember the interview. And then just 2 or 3 things that they said. You can go back through your detailed notes later, but this will serve as your key to pull up what happened during that interview.
Recruiting.
And the most important thing, none of this works if your participant doesn't care. So your number one task in some ways as a researcher is to find the people for whom this is important. That's usually the people you hope to serve, but you also want to hit them at a point where they think it's important. So Kaveh is going to talk a little bit further about how we can do this.
If I didn't explain earlier, I'm a fellow this year in the city of Denver, and one of the things we ended up doing this year was actually trying to get feedback for a number of our different applications that we worked on. The types of projects that we were working on, we're trying to figure out generally what are people's feedback about the city itself, and then also trying to get feedback on more specific projects that we're working on. When you're recruiting, it's really important to figure out not just pick anyone off the street or try to get anyone random to help you out, but try to find the person who's actually going to be able to provide you the best quality feedback for the subject you're going to be talking about. In our case, when we were talking about Denver as a whole, it was pretty easy because it's basically anyone who lives in Denver who has an opinion, and fortunately, lots of people have opinions about living in Denver. Also, it's important to look pretty sharp. You don't want to look like a slouch. You don't want to be wearing torn jeans or have tousled hair or anything like that. You want to look professional, but you also want to match the tone of where you're meeting that person. So you don't want to seem completely out of place. Sid mentioned you don't want to sound very scientific and say we're going to participate in a research study and you're going to help us. You want to actually be a little bit more natural, but dressing the part actually means a lot too. You don't want to dress wearing a lab coat and glasses and try to have a notebook and pen and be rigorously taking notes. You also want to explain as much as possible and to help them set their expectations for how much time you're going to be giving them. And these are all these things kind of fold together in a project that I actually worked on. It was a quick little way that I wanted to get some feedback about the city of Denver in Denver without putting a lot of effort into it. And I can imagine a lot of people here may have trouble trying to find people to recruit and to participate. So what I'd end up doing, and I think it might be in the next slide as well. Let's see, maybe not.
We don't have a photo.
So basically, every city actually has tons and tons of people who care about the city and who also actually happen to be really bored at any given time. If you just go to the DMV, if you go to the permitting office, it's a great place to actually find people who have nothing better to do and get their feedback.
They'll give you a lot of feedback.
Exactly, absolutely, and it's kind of amazing when you kind of just offer them that opportunity to provide feedback, the things that they will be able to tell you. Obviously, there's a little bit of venting initially, but then there's also, if you ask pretty pointed questions, they'll have a lot of feedback specifically on those particular things. So a project that I worked on while I was in Denver was actually offering people cookies and lemonade while waiting in the permitting office. And actually, it was pretty easy to get people who were just waiting around or passing by to come and participate and give us their feedback. And for 5-minute sessions, nothing longer than what we just did, I was able to get some pretty rich feedback about the things that people really liked about Denver, the things that they thought they could improve, and particular pain points that they had as well. The incentive in this case was cookies and lemonade, and you'd be surprised at how much people love cookies. It worked really well. And a good sign would also help, but it also helps to kind of catch people. It can be a little bit challenging sometimes to catch people while they're on their way from point A to point B and say, hey, do you have a second to provide feedback? And the more specific you can be, the more you can kind of catch their attention. Do you have a minute to provide feedback about the city of Denver? Do you have a minute to provide feedback about the permitting process? The more specific it is to them, the more likely they're going to be to kind of help participate. And then you just ask them questions. It's just a simple conversation. Same, try not to dominate the conversation. Try not even to be involved in the conversation. Just ask your questions and kind of let them come back to you. Super, super easy. Okay.
This is kind of a rubric of most reliable results from authentic participants. Your team members being at the less reliable end, as awesome as they all are. And then the friends you might call, people who loosely fit the demographics, people who are actually the target customers or users of the thing that you're making. If they have recent experience in the problem space, that works pretty well. I just did a 3-user session for the city of Oakland, bringing in people who'd had recent interactions with parking. We got pretty involved, rich feedback from them. People who actually have the need right now, and the best, if you can get it, is if you can intercept somebody during the moment when they are trying to do this thing and watch the whole process. Those are some of the most valuable sessions you can have if you have access, say, to the counter where something is done now. So that is what we have to share, and we will take any questions that you have. Yes?
How would you characterize verbal, particularly when polling sentiment and the kind of things that were the examples that you were talking about, polling with interviews versus, or rather, how would you address a stakeholder who says, why don't we just put up a survey monkey survey?
Yeah. So this today was all about qualitative evidence. Quantitative evidence is also really valuable, and they tend to interact. So if you get quantitative evidence that X number of people are having this level of satisfaction with this, that might tell you we need to take some kind of action, but it doesn't tell you what action you need to take because it doesn't tell you why they're having X level of satisfaction.
But I'm asking them, but I have a question.
With a drop-down box, right? Yeah. The best thing to do with folks who make that objection, if you can, is drag them in to watch a real session. Because like I said earlier, humans are cool. It's hard not to be fascinated by this if you care about it. You can get a lot of good stuff even out of analytics. People are dropping off this process at X page, but you don't know why. And yeah, you could probably post something up that said, why do you drop off? But if somebody's at the point of dropping off, they're not going to want to help you out. If they're in a context of helping you out, then you can start to identify the why, and you can do something and see if it moves your numbers.
Yeah, I would say that it's amazing how far you can get with just having somebody watch a participant kind of go through the process of using it. And even if you can't get the person to take the time to come to you and watch a participant interact with something, you can always do a recording, like Sid mentioned before, either an audio recording or a video recording. Cut it up, kind of create a little highlight reel, and send it to that person so that they can
I have been known to make swear reels for clients when I was working in industry. Every time somebody said a naughty word in the course of interacting with their thing, so that they could send it around to their executives. Easy to do with iMovie, right? Yeah.
But what do you do with the data once you compile it? And then how do you determine out of the observations, which ones you actually make a change in your application? Versus maybe you might have a user that maybe they made really bad choices.
They were some kind of outlier. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. As your sample gets a little bit bigger, you usually start to see convergence. Often happens around 5 or 6 participants. I've never done a 20-participant usability study where people weren't bored by about user 13 or 14. So you just start to see things repeat. The way to do analysis on qualitative text data is to look for themes. So some people like to do it in Excel spreadsheets. Some people like to do it with Post-it notes on a wall. But you can just start writing out, things participants said that were interesting. Your own interest is actually a great key to what's in there if you are being open while you're doing the research. write things out that were interesting, stick them all up on a wall, start looking at ones that are similar, and start making clusters. And then maybe you'll start to see a cluster that's people can't find things in the navigation. And you may have heard it like in 6 different parts of the application from 6 different people, but once you pull it all out and you see those together, that tells you that you might want to spend some time working on that. Yeah?
Do you recommend a certain frequency of doing usability testing, interviews, maybe every couple of times a year, or every few months, or?
There's a great practice which a lot of startups adopt, and Twitter is famous for doing this, which is every 2 weeks, take a morning, bring in 3 people, show them whatever you've got. It depends on how fast your development cycles are going, but if you're working in an agile methodology, not having usability testing as part of your sprint often means that you're not actually testing the hypothesis. So you want to fit that in there if you can. Shamir.
So I'm trying to wrap my head around something. So just like a specific need that we're trying to address with a particular product or thing, I'm thinking about like a system, right? Like a process by which like a cop stops somebody on the highway, pulls them over, and like trying to improve the quality of that interaction for you might not happen in the first place. And
I see some riding along with cops in your future.
yeah. So it's like, so in some cases there's multiple users, right? And you're trying to test like maybe there's like acting stuff in that.
Yeah.
I don't exactly know where I'm going with this, but I've been trying to wrap my head around this for months, trying to figure out like how to take what you're talking about and apply it in that really complex charts.
Yeah. I would love to talk about it. I think it's going to take a little more time than we have in here because they're going to be asking us to close, but that is absolutely a research question you could design a study around. Hannah.
If the people that you want to like observe, if you're not in the same place as them and it's expensive to get to that place, is there an alternative to in-person research, or would you just suggest like trying to figure out a way to get there?
There absolutely is an alternative. I, for a large chunk of my career, worked in a firm that primarily did remote research, and it's really powerful. The interesting thing about remote is that when you are not in the room with the person, they're actually less guarded. And so there's a whole bunch of great tools now, from Google Hangouts to GoToMeeting, where you can share someone's phone, and if what you're testing is mobile, and you have some anchor in the city, somebody that you know that is there, that has equipment like a laptop and so forth, and can kind of be your proxy on that end. They can have people, people come in with their phones. You can turn a laptop around and use the webcam to broadcast it to you. You can talk to people through the microphone. There's just a whole bunch of technical ways to do it. And if you think about it, I asked you guys if you had listened to a human talk about something that was frustrating. You've all probably done that on the phone, right? And you can still identify their emotional tone. You can still understand where they're frustrated. So it absolutely works remotely as well.
Cool. So we're almost at time. If you guys have additional questions, definitely feel free to come back. But we were told to kind of make sure that everyone has some time to get to lunch. Please feel free to come talk to us. And thank you all so much for attending.